empezado con el español, ora passo all'italiano per un po', per una piccola presentazione dei due ospiti nostri e poi avremo l'inglese perché abbiamo scelto di fare la conferenza in inglese, ma naturalmente le lingue si intrecceranno, quindi poi anche nelle domande si potrà fare un po' di spagnolo, si potrà usare lo spagnolo, l'italiano, il basco, qualcuno lo conosce naturalmente perché Iñaki è di origini basche, il polacco se qualcuno lo conosce perché abbiamo Renata che viene dalla Polonia, quindi somos europeos, esto seguro. Bene. Una brevissima presentazione, io credo che molti di voi conoscano questo studio che ha sede a Madrid, ma lavora a livello internazionale da molto tempo. Con Iñaki Abalos abbiamo una consuetudine antica, non ci sentivamo da un po' di tempo. Anni addietro in occasioni ovviamente delle biennali, ma anche invitato dall'Iuav e da me stesso in particolare, quando ci incrociamo in particolare negli anni in cui uscì, credo ormai 12-13 anni fa, uscì questo bel libro curato da Iñaki, uno dei tanti bei libri che lui ha fatto, che si chiama Atlas Pintoresco, che io spesso consiglio di leggere agli studenti, che era appunto una riflessione molto interessante, molto anche inedita al tempo, che in qualche modo aveva trovato connessione anche con alcuni miei studi per questa rivalutazione del pittoresco nella contemporaneità, a partire dal pittoresco dei giardini settecenteschi inglesi e britannici in generale, ma anche ovviamente da tutta l'esperienza architettonica del pittoresco che era stata molto trascurata poi per molto, molto tempo e che è ritornata in qualche modo in auge grazie anche appunto agli studi di Iñaki nell'ambito appunto di un discorso sul pittoresco contemporaneo. Ricordo per esempio insieme avevamo lavorato anche un po' a questi studi per esempio degli studiosi francesi e americani che in quel momento erano usciti sul lavoro per esempio di Serra da parte di Yves Valenbois per esempio, di Richard Serra pensato come un esponente della dimensione pittoresca nel contemporaneo, ma naturalmente moltissime altre cose. Mi ricordo che appunto in quell'occasione avemmo la possibilità di partecipare insieme a un numero di parametro, la rivista che ormai non gira più in Italia, ma che a quel tempo appunto aveva dedicato un numero monografico a questo tema. Mi sono un po' dilungato su questo, ma Iñaki Abalos è molto di più, ovviamente, questo era un ricordo personale. Iñaki, come anche Renata, insegnano da molti anni alla scuola di architettura di Madrid, però hanno insegnato anche insieme per lunghi anni a Harvard negli Stati Uniti e questa è stata credo un'esperienza anche molto importante per entrambi, che è durata non ricordo quanti anni, ma credo parecchi, insomma 4-5 anni. 4 come molti altri studiosi spagnoli appunto hanno avuto questo rapporto con gli Stati Uniti. Non si contano poi le onorificenze, i premi, eccetera, adesso non li sto a enumerare tutti. Vorrei ricordare appunto questa doppia dimensione che sia Iñaki che Renata hanno coltivato di essere da una parte uno studio di architettura molto attivo, con dei progetti molto importanti, alcuni dei quali vedremo, e dall'altra parte però anche di avere questo interesse allo studio, alle analisi, alla teorizzazione su molti campi, appunto non ultimo questo del paesaggio, che in qualche modo sul quale li interroghiamo di nuovo oggi, e quindi hanno una produzione anche editoriale libraria molto interessante, molto importante. Ricordo, oltre all'Atlas pittoresco che dicevo prima, per esempio un vecchio libro che si chiamava Tecnica di architettura nella ciudad contemporanea, poi Recycle Madrid, ancora credo con Juan Herreros, poi più recentemente Il buon abitare in italiano, però sono tutti libri comparsi in varie lingue, sia inglese che spagnola, ma anche appunto parzialmente in italiano. Appunto questo ragionamento il sottotitolo diceva Pensare le case della modernità. Ancora un altro libro che si chiama Earth, Water, Air, Fire, che racconta un po' questo discorso sull'architettura degli elementi, che in qualche modo si collega al discorso anche del paesaggio di cui parliamo. Reinterpretation of Primordial Things, un altro saggio molto interessante, e soprattutto appunto la monografia che hanno curato insieme più recentemente, che si chiama ACES on Thermodynamics, Architecture and Beauty, che è uscita nel 2015 e di cui magari forse ci diranno qualche cosa attraverso anche il racconto dei progetti che ci faranno oggi. Credo appunto, e poi ancora posso ancora citare da parte di Renata Sentkiewicz, scusa, eh, cuatro observaciones de la energía, campos pro, prototipológicos e termodinámicos. Questa questione appunto della termodinamica entra nel loro discorso, e sarà interessante magari che ci spieghino un po' come avviene anche questo. L'intervento di oggi appunto si colloca in questa riflessione che stiamo tentando di fare sulla posizione che gli architetti hanno avuto e tengono nei confronti del paesaggio. La caratteristica che ho voluto dare a questi 5 incontri è stata quella di non invitare direttamente i paesaggisti, cosa che avremmo potuto fare perché poi molti colleghi e amici hanno collaborato con noi da tutta Europa sul tema del paesaggio negli ultimi anni a Iuav, e quindi sarebbe stato interessante e facile convocare anche degli specifici paesaggisti, ma ho fatto in questo caso l'opzione di far parlare soprattutto quegli architetti, come è il caso di Abalos e di Sentkiewicz, come sarà il caso di Joan Roig la prossima volta, che si è accoppiato e ha costruito uno studio insieme con un paesaggista, appunto, che è Enric Baglie, come è stato il caso della settimana scorsa con Sandro Marpillero, architetto, anche lui in qualche modo connesso al paesaggio anche attraverso la collaborazione con una paesaggista vera, appunto, che è Linda Pollack. Mi interessava capire appunto come gli architetti, anche operanti nel campo specifico dell'architettura, spegniamo i telefoni, grazie, possano in qualche modo con le questioni del paesaggio e qual è la visione che loro possiedono di questa cosa. Questo è un po' il tema generale, ma sicuramente avremo un contributo. Nel frattempo è comparso anche Juan Manuel Palem, che sarà uno dei prossimi nostri relatori, altro architetto che col paesaggio si è sporcato molto le mani, e quindi avremo il modo di sentire poi anche da lui. Niente, io credo di fermarmi qua, anche troppo in lungo, lascerei la parola in inglese, ahimè, ma con interpolazioni di tutte le lingue che abbiamo detto, a Iñaki Abalos e a Renata Sentkiewicz, e molte grazie per essere con noi, purtroppo sempre in questa formula virtuale, ma cercheremo in futuro di poterci ritrovare anche più direttamente. Grazie e a voi la parola.
Okay. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, Renato, por esta presentación y por tantos años de amistad y intercambios. Es una pena, efectivamente, no poder estar en Venecia, que nos apetecía absolutamente todo a Renata y a mí, pero aguantaremos, como tantos, aguantaremos hasta que las cosas estén. Sí, aguantaremos, porque no hay otra palabra mejor. Well, I'm going to speak in English. I will try to speak with, let's say, clear phrases, short phrases, so the whole thing can be understood. Well, the first thing I just wanted to say is that the title of this let's say lecture is Format Flow, 3 architectural responses to entropic and productive urban landscape. The first thing, as architects, we always lie, you know. I mean, it's part of our responsibility to be a bad network quality. Do you hear me okay? It's okay, my voice? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but so we decided this morning, we decided to present 4 instead of 3 architectural responses. So this is the first thing that has to be corrected. But just going into the whole thing, we are presenting here a new book that is a kind of extension of the one that Renato was commenting, and the one on thermodynamics, architecture, and beauty. This one is more radical, it's more focused in design, and it's called New Primitivism or Nuevo Primitivismo. And it is very closely related with this wonderful phrase of one of our favorite picturesque artists, Robert Smithson, and says, the present cannot support the cultures of Europe or even the archaic or primitive civilizations. It must instead explore the pre and post-historic mind. It must go into the places where remote futures meet remote pasts. I really, and we both of us really love this idea that we cannot just concentrate in the present. We have to span the kind of time in every single action that we take. And then wait a moment. What the hell is... Okay, sorry. And this one is another phrase written in the book by us. As practitioners, we cannot be satisfied with environmental assessment systems that only consider the interior energy balance of buildings as its goal at the expense of using public space as an energy dissipation dumpster. The balanced relationship between format and flow in architectural design, achieved by both parametric tools and basic thermodynamic principles, both parametric and very basic principles, can contribute to a genuine thermodynamic architecture rooted in local material culture. Okay, and then we have in this, the other book that mentioned Renata before, we had this kind of manifesto, figurative manifesto, is trying to explain what we think thermodynamics can bring and how much the idea of thermodynamics is deeply rooted in history. The idea that the thermal engines somehow mimic very much the the spatial structure and the relationship among mass, void, and flow of earth of some historic constructions that we all have in mind. So somehow, with modernism, we have lost the knowledge, the talent to understand how the architecture can behave thermodynamically, and it has become a kind of plastic or figurative art, while has always been rooted in very serious thermal considerations. Every single traditional housing, let's say in, I don't know, in Sevilla or in Naples or in Boston or wherever, is based in thermodynamic principles and how to manage the climate resources with more efficiency and the simplest materials. No? So in somehow, this idea of thinking architecture, not only, but also thermal hygiene is quite important for us. And this is something that we began to, I mean, this will be the first project that we will present. It's very much about relating architecture with landscapes, with different landscapes. Landscapes not understood exclusively as a kind of painting, as a figurative thing, but something that gives you information about the kind of actions that are needed in order to really become efficient. So I will introduce this project, and then we'll give the words to Renata, and we will alternate. But I want to begin with this small construction you see back in below some industrial stuff in a gravel pit in Catalonia. This is the whole area, and the construction is a museum, a gallery of art, a private one, a very, very sophisticated and very exclusive collection of art. And it is one of the main things that the client wanted was to root the construction of the museum in the middle of the gravel pit. And for us, it was amazingly important because all the, let's say, the economic benefits that this family had was in debt with the earth, and somehow they wanted us to give a response that really rooted the museum in this place they love, obviously. And the first thing we were trying to understand is why a gravel pit is there in Catalonia. And you have to go I mean, you have to expand the limits of time, and you have to go to geological times first in order to understand how the tectonic plates were crashing Africa and Europe and creating some kind of the Pyrenees is okay, and the river Ebro that is somehow is a kind of mark in the whole territory. And how much the ice, water through centuries and millions, 50 millions of years, in fact, have brought all this gravel down to the south, to the flatlands, where the site of this family is placed, the gravel pit is placed. Here you have an aerial view of this gravel pit. If you see the circle down in the left side, very down in the slide, is the place. You see that there is a river, there's a city, Balaguer, a small but important city, and then to the left, you have all the, let's say, dry lands, and then the other agricultural lands are to the lower part of the southeast. And there is, when you can see clearly how the gravel has changed the land in both sides. Well, this is an image, a contemporary image of it's a typical gravel pit. I mean, it's not different to any other, but somehow the landscape, the arid landscape, is creating a kind of palette of colors, and is always suggesting like how can I say, like ideas of geometries and things, but also, I mean, this is
photos of the place.
Yeah, there are some different photos of the place. I mean, this is a clean day with clean skies that are wonderful, but this is an another kind of day, a humid day, where with all the dust of the gravel pit in the atmosphere and making the fog and making it sadder, less more sad. And this one, and I'm going to finish here. This one is another image of the gravel pit where the family began.
È successo qualche cosa? Non si sente più.
Abalos, you are muted.
Ha il microfono spento.
Allora?
Ok.
Ahora?
No.
Se ha apagado. Okay. Well, I think you were hearing me before with this slide. It's okay.
It's okay.
Okay. Yeah, and they began to prefabricate concrete. So they had the gravel, they needed the cement, and they had begun to expand the business and to make it more complex. And finally, they have all the let's say the land that was they got all the gravel they could. Finally, they had to restore it, and they decided to plant olive trees that give oil, and they have another parallel industry. They have become a kind of businessmen with circular businesses. This is one, the olive oil that is an excellent quality, and in this one, in this slide, we can see more and more materials. In this case, we can see how much they have expanded the business to asphalt, to olive, to I don't remember the name now. Cement factories, etc. And with this, I mean, with the richness they have finally gotten, and they created a wonderful collection of art with very well advised by people like Podoli, that was the director of. I mean, he's in Italy also, but he was in London in the Herzog and the Meron Museum, the director, and he recommended them to focus on two topics: the human body and matter. And when I mean, you can see Antonio Lopez, you can see William Kentridge, Juan Muñoz, that was a friend and colleague of us, etc., etc. So once you see the collection, they have, and we were really like emotion by the fact that matter and human lives are the two things that we deal with as architects. So somehow we really thought that we were close to this collection and all the history of the place, the geological times, the historic times, etc., etc. And I leave here to Renata to explain more technically the ideas that we were dealing with the museum. So, please.
So when we start with the project, this is a gravel, this is a site for the collection building. We start to study it, to understand it, and to define how it could be visited by the public. So this is a site. To study it, we draw it with all needed elements that help us. As always, when you draw, help you to understand all elements in the place. And the red line mark here, it's the line how we defined the movement of the public. The movement that can give visibility to all these productive processes that Iñaki mentioned before, that are placed on the gravel. And the building of collection will be one of the point of this line. This orange rectangular to the right, it's when we choose a site, which is a privileged place that gives visibility in different directions to different landscape. The gravel landscape, the olive oil, gravel, the olive trees landscape and also to agricultural landscape of surrounding territory. This place has a complicated topography because not long time ago, some part of her earth fall down. So we thought that we could use the construction of the building to organize this topographic landscape, but at the same time to get a approach of difference of place of different in different directions, as I commented before. These are these three corners that point in different places, more outside territory of agriculture, and the processes inside of gravel, which is just gravel process, and also the agriculture of olive trees. But I would like to go back to explain how we take decision of the form of the building. And we, as always, we get back to the origin, to the climate, just to understand the conditions, outside condition. And we have here a step called a climate, dry climate also. And these analysis of the temperature that variates a lot along of the year, from 0 degrees. You see the minimum in blue, kind of violet, and then pink line. It's night and day temperature along of the year. So it goes from 0 degrees to over 30 degrees. And when we talk about the building for collection of art, and when we have a client which is very precise, need precise conditions as the art is, but also for human beings, the other client, we are looking for kind of stability. So the first decision is that the building should be very compact. So we need the form, the volume that has a minimum exchange with exterior climate to maintain the stability of the temperature. On this scheme, also important, it's a black line that defines the temperature of the ground, 4 meters below the level, but it's much more stable. So compact volume and relation with the ground was a first conclusion that give beginning of the project. And these are the first sketches. You see, it's just cube, which is anchor put into the hill. And second step, what we start to work with, it's with natural light. We know that for collection, we want to have natural light, but we cannot have direct radiation of the sun. So we make this deformation of the roof to close to the sun and to open to the north. To get maximum light, we turn also this square 45 degrees. So, and we take this deformation from the roof to facades. So all the building naturally is opening to the north to capture natural light and to protect from sun radiation. And these are this is a volume that was defined through this decision I commented before. And in this moment, we start to work with our collaborators, the engineer, that could give us more precise data about how the building is working with the climate. What was another decision to take? It's explained in this scheme. So to get the stability of the building, we need a thermal mass, but not so much on the facade. We need this thermal mass that can give stability to the building, but much more like inner skeleton of the building. So what you see here, it's a decision that all is constructed through concrete, the slabs, the walls, it's continuous element that maintain the stability of temperature of year. And these decisions gives us these results. I guess you are used to a psychometric chart, but just to explain it fastly, for us it's a scheme or chart very helpful. that gives visibility of climate along of the year. So each point is defined through humidity in horizontal axis and temperature in vertical line. Sorry. So each blue point, it's 1 day of the year. And you have the winter on the left up, summer on the left down, and spring and autumn to the right side. And this blue rectangular is a human comfort. So as architects, we work very fastly with graphic. Here we can see that in spring and autumn, almost the climate it's comfortable for a human, no? And winter and summer it's more problematic. But this is the exterior climate. This is a next step. This is a climate which is a result of our first architectural decision. So just through the form and through the materiality, through the matter of thermal mass, we get stability. You see that the points start to get more near, what means the climate is more stable. And in spring, in autumn, we are inside of a human comfort. We have still some problem in winter and in summer. So we need to add some decisions to condition this thermal mass. So we defined that all of this concrete will be perforated. We create kind of porosity, and through this porosity, and through this porosity, we push the air. So the air, it's taken from the outside, it's going to the underground, it's taking the temperature of 14 degrees of the underground, not exactly 14, but it's getting, in summer, getting below exterior temperature, and in the winter, it's getting hotter, cooler or hotter. So giving this more comfort temperature, and the air, it's getting to these porosities. And through this, just this decision, we get in summer comfort, because we can get to 18, 17 to 20 degrees, which is inside of human comfort. In winter, it's more complicated because the temperatures of underground, it's 14 degrees, so we cannot go higher. But in this moment, we could say that just with the form, with the matter, and with movement of the air, this building can work with the art client which are art, it's art collection, and also with the human along of the air. And maybe in winter, you need to go with a light coat or jersey, just because you will be between 15 and around 15 degrees. If we would like to go to perfect comfort, we can add another porosity inside of the concrete, which is water, this time as radiant floor to heat the human body. And this is how this construction would work. It's a lot of tubes in different direction, but it's complicated to make. But once we put the concrete, the building it's finished, let's say. It's one material building. We don't have any finishings, concrete floor, walls, and ceiling. And here you can see this entropic landscape, this collection of elements of the building, of the collection, of the industry that include a kind of different productive landscapes. And the building form part of this composition. Sections and floor plans, you see that this porosity in the slabs repeats in the walls. The building is very simple. It's just concrete construction. I will not get deeper, but you could see how different walls are conditioned, perforated, are conditioned of the interior. Now getting to the last floor, it's different. It's for events. It's when more public could appear, and when this added ventilation in the roof can help to condition the temperature, the balance, the interior balance. And each of these floors, each of these exhibition, it's completed with the observatories, lookout points that become part of the tour for a collection of the art. So the events, the last floor, it's a viewpoint open to the north where you have an olive tree landscape and this big opening. We have the view to the west, to the agricultural landscape of surrounding territory, and the viewpoint or observatory of the gravel. On the entrance floor, a ground floor with temporal exhibitions, auditorium, and the underground. This is the box completely protected below the earth for video arts. And all these floors that you see, the sequence down of the image, are crossed through the void, vertical void, that it's organizing the flow of the people, the movement and connection between different floors, but also the flow of air. So this void, it's for buoyancy, it's taking all the hot air up to the roof, when during the night you open the windows and you can ventilate it and restart for the next day. And to finish this last image, that it's for us somehow the image that is out of time, that it can be understood as a thermal machine. It's at the same time a museum, at the same time observatory, and it's embedded in form part of the landscape as the concrete. It's produced on the site and it's produced with the color of the air or earth or the ground that it's surrounding it. As to Iñaki, if you want to add something.
No, we like it. We like this project.
Iñaki, simplemente un minuto. He visto que estaba una mano de Paolo Marcoaldi. Puede ser che sì. Vuoi fare una domanda?
No, sorry, it's my fault. I find this project, this proposal, and this image in particular very interesting, but I don't want to stop the conversation. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. We can maintain for the debate. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for this. I mean, we give a big jump to Shanghai. But it's practically contemporary at the same time. Designed, this has been built first. This is a very strange commission, very circumstantial, so to say, because we didn't expect to make a church and even less in Shanghai, in a non-Catholic, I mean against Catholic religion country, you know. But the fact was that there was a very bad design, and they decided to ask, I mean, knowing that we were around and that Renata is Polish and I'm Spanish, so we are from two Catholic countries, they thought, the authorities thought that maybe we could really improve the original design. No? It's a kind of very curious way to think. I mean, you know where is Shanghai, and that is a kind of different climate, hot and humid, and this is the place, the red dot is there. This thin form of the church is forced by the fact that there is an underground, the serpentine that is around, and you can see just almost touching the longest side of the church. Forced us to just to use this very small corner of a park that had a river and finally a lake, a small river just connected to the Jampu River. huge, wonderful, beautiful river that crisscrosses Shanghai. And this is a new neighborhood planned for international businessmen with a kind of a stadium, etc., etc. So by the governor of this area, very close to the airport. So you can see the apartments here, the model, and the church, how it interacts with the complex and super dense, as everywhere in Shanghai, neighborhood planned by these authorities. And here you see what finally was made. The small spring, the small river was transformed into a lake, much more interesting and beautiful. And we are just occupying the corner of one of the main entrances to the neighborhood. So somehow they decided that this was an interesting site, because everyone coming to decide if they were going to stay or not with their businesses in Shanghai, they see that there are, let's say, Protestant or Catholic, because it's ecumenic. Finally, it's ecumenic. The church is welcoming everyone. No? So this is the reality built. And one of the things that we made was to change, to manipulate the original design that was really ugly, I have to say, and we divided in two buildings: the bureaucratic part, administrative part, and the religious part. We decided that somehow we had to maintain the scheme, but create an entrance to the park and to the church at the same time, as you can see here in this image, and you can see in the plan. And we began to think about the kind of church, because it had to be ecumenic. So we wanted to make it longitudinal, as let's say the tradition of the Catholic churches, but at the same time we had to deal with other kind of Protestant, many other Christian churches that sing and interact with the auditorium in a kind of more theatrical way, and everyone singing, etc. So it had to be a kind of interface among the traditional longitudinal, let's say, one room, and kind of more, let's say, articulated, no, around the pivoting around the director of the whole scenography. So you see to the left, the administrative, to the right, the main, and the second chapel up there, smaller but connected with the main one through sliding doors. So it can have like 1,200, 1,300 people at the same time. And then the roof, which is one of the things that was key for us, to connect the church to the park, to really, and this is, I mean, to really make something, to make this church a part of the public space. And let's say the tower is just a ventilation tower, it's just a void. So if we go, bells. Yeah, for the bells and the, let's say, the iconography of the cross, etc. And so if you see here, the finishings are, I mean, the budget was really modest, so we just wanted to go with the concrete in the let's say, lower parts, and white and green. And this is the site of the park, and you compare with the scale of the neighborhood and the construction, and it's somehow a kind of interesting contrast, but also uses the white and also triangular shapes that you see everywhere. Sorry. Okay, thank you. And you see here the concrete. I mean, we are. I don't know if in Italy it's like this, but in the 60s in Spain, a lot of religious architecture was dealing with concrete and this kind of roughness, no? And these rugosities that for us are like somehow very much connected with this kind of churches and constructions of this moment. And at the same time, for us was a way to guarantee some finishing that couldn't be delicate. I mean, so we prefer to use a kind of rough concrete than a kind of a smooth one. This is one of the entrances. from the basement. The basement has a car park. I mean, it's very American in this sense. You can park your car below and then go up to the. And here you see what I was trying to explain first: the fact that it's like half of an auditorium, but it's also longitudinal. And the whole roof is the best concrete made at work, so it's very well finished, to be honest. And it's well, but you see, I mean, it doesn't need too much explanation. So these are the elements we can control, and the rest is out of our control. And in fact, still the church is not in use because the neighbors have not arrived yet. So the whole neighborhood will be put at work at once, and the preacher will come at the same time. The new neighbors come. Well, and so the furniture is still waiting for the neighbors, and the cross couldn't be like other palette than red, which is like the Red Cross and it's strange, or golden. So we decided to go for golden. I mean, they have this kind of strange, let's say, specifications. So here to the west, we have all the ventilation. I mean, it performs through the lightning systems. Now you see to the east, the sun comes like this. To the west comes horizontal. I mean, there is a kind of ritualistic use of light that I don't want to go too deep into it. But I mean, it's true that coming from Catholic countries, we know a little bit about all these things, and it's not difficult to manage them as an interesting resource for architectural control. No? Here you have the sliding doors that open the little chapel, which is this one, which is for private ceremonies, but also for the most crowded moments of the year. And then there is this other thing, which is you pass through the gate of the church, and which is the entrance to the park, and at the same time you see this, let's say, exaggerated stair that is inviting you to go up. And when you go up, you find a green roof which has a kind of beautiful views of the river and the neighborhood, and has this kind of open air ceremonial grates. So that are basically for weddings, because I mean weddings come in spring, and they like to make them in outdoor services, etc. And that is creating the whole image of it's a completely different. Well, I don't know if it is completely different. It's somehow a different geometry, but it's very much linked to the smoothness that the movement of people when they go to religious spaces acquires, and naturally. And we wanted to make the transition among the park and the different chapels like a kind of elegant and ceremonial way to move, a delicate way of moving. Well, this is the bells are made in bronze, but they sound horribly. I mean, horribly. It's horrible to hear them. So we couldn't change them. And then, well, you see this kind of interconnection among the let's say the garden, which is nice. As every park or garden in China, they have wonderful landscapers, I have to say. And they take a lot of care for them, not like in Spain. And this is, let's say, the image of a small, well, not that small church, but at the same time, something that wants to create a kind of authority and a kind of ceremonial, and at the same time invite people to go in or around it. And this is the last slide where you see the church, the neighborhood, the lake, and the connection with at the end with the Yangpu River and Shanghai in the foreground. Well, I mean, this is the one thing that is quite connected, I have to say, with the third one, and this is why instead of 3, we want to bring 4 different cases, because this one is again in China, in the south of China, in Zhuhai, very close to Macau, and is in the not in the river, in the sea front, and it has again terraces and wide surfaces and many of the patterns that we being unconscious were using in both moments without figuring how closely they could be related, with the stairs coming up, etc., etc. But I give the word to Renata for this.
Here you have the map, what Iñaki was commenting. We are in Zhuhai. Do you see the pointer? Yes?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we are here in the frontier, here. In the frontier between Zhuhai and Macau. And from this point, it's when is coming the bridge. Probably you hear in the news some couple of years ago, I think it's the biggest, the longest bridge in the world, 60 kilometers long, that connects Hong Kong, China, Zhuhai, and Macau. These 3, we could say, countries. So the site is amazing. It was a competition. Here we're getting near to the site. This is this red rectangular rhomboidal form. It's in the waterfront. So you have on one side the bay of Zhuhai. You have Macau to the south, and a city of Zhuhai, and the bridge that when we started the project was not constructed yet, but we knew that it will happen. Here there are some images of the bridge, and then in a down photo, you have the place when the building will be constructed. It was, as I say, it was a competition, and as always, we start to have a look to the climate. And I will come back to the climate. In this case, we are in humid and hot tropical climate. And this is our proposal. As Iñaki commented, and I want to focus, it's that iconic elements or the most important elements of the projects are much more as a building, are exterior spaces. No? Knowing this site from the beginning, we thought that it shouldn't be a museum that it's completely closed white box, but it should be a museum that can get out, it can have these public spaces. This museum can be observatory of these incredible surroundings and different landscapes. And this is the image of the museum looking to the Macau that you see on the right up part, and the view on the other side to the waterfront, to the bay of Zhuhai. No? This building that you have in the back, it's a frontier of between Macau and Zhuhai. No? And this is the end of China, no? The last site. But again, let's go to the beginning, how the decisions were taken in this building. And on the right side down, there is a plan and section of a parking lot. This was the part of the competition. So we were given this project already made. And so we know that we have this concrete structure of, I don't remember, 15 or almost 20 meters to the underground. We've defined columns and construction that fulfill all the sites. So at the beginning, we start to think that it is much more problem, but lately we decide that, okay, once we have this concrete mass, why we don't take it to the over the floor, continuing the structure and continuing concrete. So from this moment, the project starts much more like cutting from the existing volume. So we have this full volume of the parking going up, and we start to cut different spaces. First important space was the inner courtyard. As we know that in subtropical humid climate, the cross ventilation is a key. We need it, so the building cannot be deep. So we make this big void in the middle. You can see on the schemes, the red scheme that the thermal mass, the concrete mass, it's extended to the up part. There's a cut for the courtyard. There's a deformation of the roof to dry this space from humidity to get all sun radiation. And there are some ideas of openings, very little vertical openings to protect from sun radiation, but to bring air inside to use cross ventilation. So these decisions start to create these two outside spaces. One, the observatory of the roof, that these waves or curves that were coming from the sun directions become amphitheaters, and this observatory become place for the event open to the public, and the void, the inner void, become the courtyard, exterior courtyard that can be part was decided to be part of the exhibition. So once we create this courtyard, we start to think, okay, we need to protect it. We need to protect it from the sun. We need to protect it from the rain. And we start to think about these canopies. And this is here, you see these first ideas, how the canopy creates these kind of bubbles that create the units, the spaces that unify the form of a tree, of a canopy, and the form of the amphitheater. That here it's visible on this sketch. And when we start to think about these canopies, we find this example of tree, the prehistoric tree, which is a dragon tree, that it's very different than other trees because it's not drinking water from the underground, not through the roots, but it's taking water through the dew, through the air, through the humidity in the air, and from the up of the canopy. And this humidity is distributing through the branches of the tree. So it has very precise geometry because of this. It's working kind of machine of exchange of the water. So when we start to define this tree, we think, okay, if we protect from the water, we can recollect the water. If we protect from sun radiation, and we have this kind of sophisticated collection of void, maybe we can not only work with the movement of the water, but also we can work with flow of the air. And in this moment, we start to work with Salman Craig to define this possibility. And here you have described how this machine would work. This is a cycle of 24 hours that it's with air going down and air going up. It's close the circle in 24 hours. How it works in the morning, the canopy, up part of canopy, the air is colder, but also with the first sun, the dew in the air start to, how do you call it? Transform to the water. I don't find now in Spanish. Okay, so the humidity in the air change the state to the water. This needs the energy, so the air is getting colder. And this cold air, it's going down through all these tubes, and it's going down to the courtyard. So along of all the morning, the cold air is going down, but along of the day, the mass of the trees start to be hotter and hotter. And in the afternoon, it's one moment that the flow change. So the cold air stopped to go down, and the hot air from the courtyard is going to the up part. So these trees are kind of heat exchanger. They are open in the down part, and through these trees, it's this experience of drinking cold water along of the whole morning, and in the evening, taking out the hot air, sorry. Yeah. So the form, as I explained, it's very sophisticated, not sophisticated. We need the flow of the air. So all it's precisely defined from one branch to 180 branches in the upper part, always in each section with the same surface to make this flow smooth. It's a kind of thermal machine because it has very high surface area, respect the volume ratio. So it's working like thermal exchanger machine. The matter, we designed the stainless steel as it's the material, the steel material, which has the higher character, the best characteristic as thermal mass. And also it reflects the sun. And these are kind of geometry, how the tree is constructed through 5 pieces. And all this canopy, it's recollecting the water, but it's going down to the deposit that it's in the underground. These are drawings already, construction drawings. And here you can see the section of the building, the inner space with 6 dragon trees, the canopies, and the exhibition ring that is surrounding this place. And bringing back the idea of the observatory, the roof space with the amphitheater, the courtyard with canopies, and the last image, which is a facade of the museum. These trees, they are giving the iconic character, and this is the first image you see when you come through the bridge from the Hong Kong.
Okay.
Okay.
Here is Renata with one of the leaders of the construction company in the construction site. This is we are waiting for the second step now. Okay. The last one is finished. Is an intermodal station and a park in Logroño, in La Rioja, the place where one of the best wines of Spain are produced. I mean, La Rioja is well known all over the world. And this was the product of an international competition we won, and has taken us like 16 years to finish. So it's a slow process that you have to be patient and deal with many different facts. 5 mayors of Logroño, the city where is located the intermodal station. It's a small city, 180,000 people. The river Ebro, the biggest river in Spain, very important. The one that you've seen in the first slides when we were showing the gravel pit is the same river, and the city was cut in the south by this kind of huge train station for passengers, for goods, etc., local trains, national trains. It's a kind of barrier that socially it changed it completely from north to south of the city. So it had a lot of problems. Once that it became sunken, I mean, on the ground, the whole thing was transformed by us into this. This is the first part, the train station. We have finished also the bus station. I will explain it now. And what was previously a kind of barrier has become a place that unifies north and south and creates a center, a new center in the south. And And what was a kind of wall separating north and south has become a ring of green spaces that reconnect the whole city and give a lot of new spaces for bikes, joggers, etc., etc. So the whole idea of the project is based in this idea. It's social, but it's also landscape, and at the same time it's infrastructural. So somehow I think that was needed to show this project because it completes quite well our approach to entropic or productive landscapes. In this case, Logroño is in a key point of touristically, I mean, in a key point of high-speed trains, very close to the Basque Country, to Bilbao, to the Catalunya, Barcelona, to Madrid, 1 hour and a little bit more from Barcelona in a high-speed train. So for weekends, for example, is a wonderful plan, and it's a beautiful region. The whole idea, La Rioja, is incredibly nice. But this is the model that we presented to the competition. And the reason why we won it, I mean, as you can see, there is no train station, no iconic shape for any kind of it's just a slope. It's a kind of smooth slope in continuity with the green corridor, and some towers and some slabs that reconnect the whole void with the north-south areas already constructed. We were fighting against Rotterdam, as we always say, because it was Foreign Office when Alejandro was the director of the Berlage Institute, NVRDV, OME, and Westgate. So it was the whole pack of Rotterdam best architects fighting against us. But if you see their models and you compare them with ours, you see that their models are full of, let's say, 19th century blocks or things like that. You know, it's a kind of mess, and ours is like about public space, about landscape, about connecting the idea of movement with the idea of not only of train, but also human bodies. No? This is another view of our, and these are the 3 boards. These 3 are the boards of the competition. I always bring them to show why we won this. First, the first one was a study of the changes at the urban scale. It's a small city. It has a lot of potential, by the way, and it's growing now. Even now, it's growing, which is almost a miracle. And so once that you could identify the key points where the connectivity could be reshaped, the whole idea of making a park or creating a kind of green belt made a lot of let's say, for the imagination of the people of the city was amazingly attractive, obviously. You know? And this is the main drawing of the stations. You don't see anyone, you just see green stuff. You know? It's just some turrets and green parks. And this is why, I mean, this is the main reason why we win. But we were selecting, and you see water ponds, we were selecting the idea of a green surface just because of the river Ebro so close to the city. The whole city, I mean, it's one of the few, if not the only one in Spain, that it has a lot of subterranean channels of water. The drainage surface of the whole city allows you to work with green stuff very easily. I mean, you notice that it's one of the few cities that is along all the seasons of the year completely green in Spain. So we said we can really do something that is easy to maintain and productive in terms of reactivation of the whole sector. Here you see the shape, the U shape of the bus station to the right, the train station to the left, the small towers, 60 meters or so, like looking to the, let's say, the topography around the flatness of the city. Well, this is a scheme that explains the many layers that we had to deal with. I mean, many infrastructural layer, parking layer, let's say subterranean car park, etc. And this is a kind of well, I don't think that we are interested in this one because it's very slow. And it's the steps. I mean, how to build this? It was about how to build this step by step without disconnecting one part of the city to the other. It's more about engineering the process of construction. I mean, this is the final image of the park and the 5 towers, the final image of the towers, and the transformation of the drawing for the competition into a drawing inside the city. And these are the images of both stations and the 5 towers. The towers are terraced and are also very green, looking, I mean, like balconies that are rotating and have a solar collectors, photovoltaic solar collectors that capture photovoltaic energy for the maintenance, for the lighting of the park at night, and also for hot water for the residents. Yeah, so here you can begin to see how much the let's say the patterns become more triangular, and how in the final decision, because of some technical issues, we change it to the left is the train, the bus station, to the right is the train station. Is the only change, and these are the final the real sections of the whole thing. So the triangular shape comes from the fact that we needed to construct. Obviously, we were limited by a low budget. I have to say that a very famous Pritzker Prize architect had the commission, exactly the same commission, for another city of Spain, the city where the president of the government was born in those days. And it couldn't be made because they tested the schematic design. It was 10 times more expensive than the budget that we had, and they had. And ours, including the park, was almost in the budget. So this was an important difference. And the triangular shape allowed us to, instead of going to a huge span like the conventional 19th century station, to go with columns and to create this kind of grotto cavern shape instead of, let's say, a kind of 19th century industrial crystal palace or whatever exactly. So, and these drawings show these drawings are politically very important because they were the contrast among us as architects and the companies, where the limits for them and us were traced. So from this line out, it was our, let's say, field of authority. Inside was their field of authority. And it worked quite well along the whole process. You see the columns. The columns are trying to save the complex problems in the basement. It has a lot of stuff. So we went and never had more than 20 meters of span. So it was easy to manage. Yeah, well, you see that you go down to the tracks that are sunken, and you see there are some skylights that you would see. This is the structure. The structure is very simple. I mean, we were not interested in trying to become like amazingly interesting in structural terms. What we wanted is to make it simple and to really create all the effects we wanted to create without like spending lots of money. So you see the column in the left side, and you see all the surface that is maintained at this column. But if you compare all these geometries with the roof is completely irregular. It's very simple. It's the most conventional slab that you can have, and has this kind of shapes just because the whole materials can adapt their geometry. It's regular, and then the forces go from one side to the other and then the whole thing is built. Up there, the triangular shapes become the parterres of the new park. When you go up to the upper parts of the park, the triangular shapes are transferred from inside to outside. And somehow, with Teresa Galí, the well-known Spanish Catalan landscaper, we were dealing with this kind of geometrical patterns everywhere. Inside, with artificial materials, with extruded aluminum shutters that are commercial products, very simple and very efficient, recycled aluminum, and outside this kind of geometries adapted to natural materials. This is the entrance, the station, and this is the upper part. When the upper part has the most sand with cement and different brushes, etc., and inside you have these skylights that you can see through of some of these shutters of aluminum. While you move in a station, you always move longitudinally, mainly from the door to the train track and vice versa. So all these facets of our triangular shapes in one moment become translucent, transparent, and they show completely the interior. You will see it later. This is the way you go down to the, which is very normal. And then you have the skylights that give some light to the park at night, and also to during the day to the areas where people wait for the trains. Up and down. And this kind of geometry creates a complete new way to look at the city. I mean, a lot of people are visiting and making, I mean, Instagram is full of let's say, portraits of people rediscovering the relationship of the city with its surroundings and the mountains and the, let's say, important, more interesting motifs of the surroundings, natural surroundings. The skylights have this kind of kaleidoscopic way of projecting the natural light inside and expanding it, so you can really enjoy a kind of interesting space, and outside create this kind of let's say a parade of monster skylights, no? And well, this is a kind of very clear image of the transversal section. And here you see what I was telling before. This is the, let's say, the structural complexity, and this is what you have when you. I mean, this is the relationship among engineering the station and designing the station. For us, was the only. It was a very key element for us to really control the budget and at the same time to be able to create the effects that we wanted to create. Of light, darkness, roughness, monumentality, modernity also. I mean, it's the new high-speed train coming to small cities in Spain, a completely new issue for all of us. Yeah, and tracks are almost like the most simple elements, like to maintain the quality with the quality of the construction, but at the same time some kind of fundamental quality too. And and this is the day and the night view of from the hill, from here a group of kids, enjoying the view and playing, etc. This is quite important because you can see the cranes around and new constructions, and now is full of the new constructions. That even in the crisis that we had the last years in Spain, this was one of the few cities and the few places in the city that still had a kind of interesting activity. And then we continue with the bus station very quickly. I don't want to insist, but you see that the geometries are similar, but at the same time they are adapted to the, let's say, the bus movement. Yeah. While the construction is again very, very simple. The structure has the same principles. And here you see how we are finishing it with the extruded aluminum slides. And instead of having glass in the facades, we have this kind of stainless steel mesh that maintains the ventilation, but at the same time there is a texture and a protection. And here you have one of the most important places, the gate of the city, the view to the south, the union, the connection among the both stations that has a gigantic dome of 60 meters that we were always crossing our fingers because we were really scared about not doing it. Finally, they decided to pay for it. I mean, this is the ring that maintains the whole structure up. The moment of the lifting it, and then the main beams connecting both stations. To the left is the bus station, almost finished, not yet. The lobby, the entrance. The other is completely finished. Not a single glass was broken while the process, which is almost a miracle. And this is the whole the new hill in the city. The whole green surface that creates a topography and spaces for children, spaces to the sun, spaces for a drink or a chiringuito. All these kind of conventional things are there, and well, kind of small lake for children, a little auditorium, outdoor auditorium in front of the lake. And this is the bus station, which somehow is similar and somehow it's quite different. So the materials are similar, but you can see that the configuration is different, and also the light. While the train station is about sunken constructions to going down and going down into the earth, this one is going up to the park and going up to the sky. These glasses are oriented to the west, so at the end of the day will still have a ray of sun going into, and there's this orange star dramatically pointing out there. No, it's a huge star that is just, if you look up to the left, you see the V-shaped cables that maintain it in equilibrium. Is the whole here you see it quite well. Is everything is in the same steel, and the V-shaped cables are maintaining the whole structure. And the dome that contains and maintains the connection among both. So when you go out and you enter into the city, this is a new gate, a new entrance, and this is the other side, the longitudinal and the transversal of this building that is, construction infrastructure, but somehow is the biggest building that we have finalized and the one that has taken more efforts, but at the same time, but at the same time is the one that somehow explains in a better way how we understand the relationship among landscape, public space, social issues, infrastructure, industrial buildings, and somehow also primitive or symbolic shapes as the dome, which is probably the most symbolic and most, let's say, the architectural piece of construction that we have ever made. So I finalize with this quotations on the Smith about remote futures meet remote pasts. This idea of format of flow, how can it relate our design decisions with landscape, with the landscape understood not only in a figurative way, but also in a technical way. So thank you for the patience and your attention. It's a pleasure to respond. If you have comments or questions, even critics, we can respond them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Renata and Iñaki. It was very intense and interesting to see these projects. So abbiamo abbastanza pochi studenti, ma un parterre di colleghi piuttosto nutrito, e quindi credo che ci saranno sicuramente delle curiosità, delle domande da parte loro. Una primissima osservazione, ma mi pare abbastanza chiaro tutto il discorso che hai fatto, anche riassunto in queste parole. Questo fatto di concepire, diciamo, il discorso del rapporto tra l'architettura e il paesaggio in realtà come la possibilità, la suggestione che il paesaggio diventi elemento costitutivo dell'architettura stessa, cioè sono quasi dei paesaggi artificiali, mi pare di capire i tuoi progetti, no? Con questo rapporto appunto con le macchine biologiche, che in qualche modo, questo biomorfismo in qualche modo che si ritrova. The question I put, but I ask also to the colleagues and students to intervene, but only the first question is how you see a continuity between your first studies about the relationship between landscape architecture and architecture. I remember your first intervention in an old Biennale about this fusion or this connection, and you said, I remember that practically the best architecture is in reality the architecture more involved in the mechanism of the landscape. Is there a continuity between that first studies and readings of you and this evolution you showed us? I think so, but I would like to know how you read this evolution of your work.
Well, I think this corresponds to me. I mean that the one that began to make noise with the issue of landscape in Spain. I think that obviously it has to have a continuity, because I mean we cannot invent ourselves every morning. No? That's very clear, and the processes are slow, and there are moments that the processes just jump into kind of new things or new concepts that bring new light. I think that the fact that at the beginning I was quite interested in the theory of the picturesque. Everyday Price, the 3 essays on landscape, it's amazing, beautiful book that could be written today, and you can read it and have a lot of fun. I mean, it's so contemporary, the attitude of the writer, that is a fantastic invitation to rethink the role of the empiric science in terms of aesthetics. You know, and that was a fantastic discovery for me. I mean, honestly, one of the old books that I read with, I mean, having a lot of fun, I mean, and enjoying this kind of transition from empirism to the picturesque, this connectivity. So from the very beginning, I began to suspect that if that was the point of Abidine Price, the connection of the, let's say, the scientific knowledge that empirism was, I mean, it was a revolution in the way of looking to nature, and to looking to, I mean, instead of being nature, instead of being the mysterious, dangerous, obscure, dark area, was the revelation. Nature was able to give new knowledge, scientific knowledge, to know more things about us. So it changed completely the way nature was seen. I began to think that somehow our new scientific, let's say, knowledge had to say something about that. I mean, had to be able to help us to give a kind of, to go a step beyond the traditional picturesque. Robert Smithson was key for me too. I mean, I think that he somehow had a kind of, let's say, modern attitude, a kind of bad boy, making jokes, in reality somehow making strange things, that like a kind of child going to the desert to put stones in a kind of spiral jetty, etc., etc. So, and I thought that I was quite sympathetic with his work and his attitude, and at the same time, I was seeing the parallelism among he and some of the writings of Cedric Price in London. Another one that, well, is British, so every British is a picturesque person by definition, but Cedric Price had it embedded in his family traditions, etc., etc. There are projects by him that really look like the projects of Robert Smith. So, and so thermodynamics, to go like fast, came to me like something that was related with architecture, because basically sustainability was a kind of very poor definition for me. I mean, I needed something more ambitious or something more open, you know? And thermodynamics brings like a kind of knowledge about the organic and the inorganic. I mean, it describes the matter in general terms, you know, and life also. And so, and then also the fact that, I mean, Renata has a kind of, I mean, she's a civil engineer. You know, she knows, she's much more, let's say, familiarized with more technological issues. I mean, gave us both kind of interesting way to put together our approaches. And I think that this was the moment we began to work together. I think that we discovered that we could multiply our sources instead of adding them, and we could go one step beyond. And this is why thermodynamics became a kind of thing very much rooted with landscape and very much rooted with the picturesque. So for me, there is a kind of clear, maybe biographical, but also, I mean, very logical transition from one to the other. I don't know if you have to say something, Renato.
I think that there are different words that brings these different disciplines or different subjects, no? like Pinterest, thermodynamic, etc., landscape, no? Architecture, no? all these together. For instance, like time. No? When we start to think in Pinterest, we start to think in movement. We start to think in time. And when you think in time about the buildings, there is a winter and summer. So there is a kind of meeting place. Thermodynamic is just a word, no? But what we are talking about is that there is a matter, but there is also the emptiness that should be taken into account, no? Like the air. And we as an architect should understand and increase our tools to think in all these elements, how they work together and how they work in time. No? And appears time, appears experience, perception, the human body as a center of architecture. So architecture, it's not anymore something you are looking, but there is something you are living. There is something you experience. Also with, like, you experience when you get to the cathedral in summer, and there is a kind of cold coming to you, like the stone would like to take all your heat out from you. So there is this part of architecture interesting to experience, and there has a lot of to do what we can say with Pinterest as well.
Thanks. Sentiamo se c'è qualche domanda dal pubblico. Sicuramente ci sono delle curiosità. Alzate la mano oppure intervenite direttamente. Sento delle voci, ma non sono solo di sottofondo. C'è qualcuno che vuole? Il mio amico Juan Manuel Palermo sicuramente avrà da interloquire, io penso. No, ti riservi per la tua performance. Nessuno vuole? Abbiamo ancora un po' di tempo a disposizione. Ci vuole un po' di coraggio. Lo strumento non aiuta.
No, io soltanto salutare a Iñaki e a Renata, con un grande piacere vedervi che stanno bene, e mi è piaciuto, sono sempre bravi. Sono alcuni aspetti lì che mi interessano molto, come state lavorando, e spero vederci per discutere, anche per vedere anche le possibilità dei lavori, che mi sembra una bellissima strategia in questo momento.
Juan, in quanto grande esperto dell'albero del drago, dovresti
infatti, questo è fondamentale, perché quello del
canario.
È proprio, sono diventato commosso, assolutamente commosso. Più alto questo, non sento adesso sento bene. Sì, dico che sono diventato commosso di questo drago bellissimo. Anche peraltro avete disegnato un bellissimo drago,
Sì.
Non so di dove l'avete trovato, però devo dirti che
you can notice that we'll be coming to Canary Islands for many years.
Non ne avevate ancora di questi draghi nelle Canarie?
Well, I must send you and maybe the next week, because here is the person, very interesting person, called Álvaro Fajardo, that is the man who know the best knowledge in the world and know everything about the code drag.
Ah, the code drag.
So please, you must come here to make the conference about that project, because he is in love about the project. That's true. There, in the code, absolutely.
Te pediré los datos para conectar. Okay. That would be great. Yeah.
The person that know all the history about the code drag. It's really great.
Okay. Fantastico.
Well, compliment.
Sentiamo se c'è qualcun altro dei nostri amici romani, per esempio, c'è qualcuno che vuole fare qualche chiosa? Non vedo tutti.
Hemos dormido a todos.
No creo. E sarebbe interessante anche sapere la reazione degli studenti. Erano abbastanza pochi collegati e speriamo... Ah, qui c'è Nicola Russolo che interviene. Prego, Nicola.
Quando riesco a collegarmi, si sente?
Sì?
Okay. Hello, I suppose I should ask in English. Good evening.
Yeah.
I'm Nicola. I have a particular question. As an architect, you mostly work with other architects to make projects or other professionals like engineers and stuff. And very often I find that if an architect says he's interested in landscape, he will be interested just in the views or in the picturesque idea of landscape, or the relationship with the landscape and the building from the outside or also from the inside, as well. You work a lot in your projects. But very often there seems to be no connection in architects' minds between the environment as a whole, so taking the landscape and environmental aspects, internal and external of a building, and the landscape. So how can I try to put in someone else's mind when I'm working with people on a competition or something, that one should look at the two things together? Because I find that, of course, like as you said, in modernist architecture, we lost the connection with local materials and the use of thermodynamics in the most basic way. So we do the most stupid things with buildings in order to do something that we find, oh, this would be cool, so let's do it this way. And very often people just don't connect the two things, and I find it hard to make people talk about the two in a project. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Nicola. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that, I mean, let me say that somehow it's what you are describing is something that is fading away. I mean we've lived ways of thinking about the picturesque very similar to what you are describing, like 15 years, 20 years ago. But step by step, I mean, it began with the discourse on sustainability, all this stuff that finally just became very bureaucratic, the ranking systems of LEED, etc. But somehow introduced all the ways, the need of studying the performativity of our buildings, materials, shapes, etc. And step by step, it has, I mean, a new sensitivity has been introduced, not expanded, but in a minority of the, and I think that more and more the biggest responsibles of construction companies are leading this movement instead of being something that is pushed forward by, let's say, the young kids. I think that nowadays we are living in a situation that is, I don't think it's paradise at all. I mean, it's a minority what I'm describing, but this is a minority enough important as to make us think. You know? I mean, many of the biggest companies are more and more interested in leading an environmental movement instead of being lost in the old times. They want to lead it. I mean, they don't know how. They need technicians. They need to connect themselves with artists, with technicians, with architects, but they are trying to do this effort. I mean, and this is, I mean, I don't want to describe it as a kind of wonderful thing. It's full of let's say, tricky things. They want to lead it because they think the money will come from there. I mean, it's very clear.
It's a bit of a marketing thing sometimes. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. But sometimes it's more honest and more serious, the kind of commitment. So it's, I mean, I couldn't even imagine having a conversation on I mean, what to do with garbage and how can we really reorganize the recycling plants or whatever, like 20, 15 years ago. And now we go to places and they ask us for solutions and for ideas that could really create this, let's say, among all the key words that marketing has invented around this issue of environmental sensitivity, I think the idea of circularity the double circle of the natural materials and the industrial materials, etc., is very clear and very easy to digest by, let's say, companies, construction companies, for example, and it probably is bringing, let's say, a more interesting bureaucratic way of understanding the role of architects than we had ever before, in terms of how to reconnect landscape issues, not in a decorative way, but in a kind of an issue of as an issue of responsibility, social responsibility with the planet, all these kind of things that I say. So I'm not, I mean, I'm not enthusiastic about it, but I'm seeing the movement. So I don't want to be like, we are the only ones leading this. No, I mean, a lot of people are trying in different ways to move and to position themselves in relationship with these topics in a more accurate and more interesting way. For us, the problem has always been how to connect ideas that are in the media, etc., with techniques of design techniques. From the very first moment, before thinking about any other thing, the whole idea, for example, Renata was explaining, we first of all go to understand the climate. I mean, we understand the material culture. We try to ourselves, we have a kind of vernacular architecture. We try to understand. I mean, this is a kind of thing that in the school we force the students to do. That is, first, I mean, you have to study the climate, etc. But immediately we say, we talk about the house-palace dialectic, which is to study a beautiful traditional house of the place, a beautiful palace in history, both, and then move to the modernism and do the same exercise, to select one beautiful modernist house and a beautiful modernist palace, and to study them in order to create, to understand the material culture and the evolution of the material culture. And we always say the same. I mean, not the vernacular, not the modernist will give you a clue. I mean, because, I mean, you cannot mimic what happened in the 15th century because we are different. I mean, everything has changed. And you cannot mimic the modernists because they didn't give any interest to mostly all of them, except Richard Neutra and a couple more. I mean, it was about formalism, about many other things, artistic practices, etc. But I mean, we need to absorb these two traditions, the vernacular and the modernist, because I mean, they are both are our traditions. We need to digest them. So studying them, you somehow learn something, but at the same time learn that you are in a different position. You have a different culture, and you begin to identify what makes your culture interesting compared to these traditions. I mean, this is something that somehow, not for everyone, but for many students, we have experience with them. I mean, it has been a kind of very productive technique to enter into this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
yes. So it's true at the end that if you don't have a client or a company that is interested in playing with these themes, at least playing with these issues, is kind of useless to try to work on them. Although I think it's a big responsibility of the designer to say, okay, we work on this and we work on it for real. Like we don't want to just put a bit of grass on a terrace. We are actually trying to make the building work with environmental issues. And quite often I experienced working with other architects that maybe they want to put a bit of the facade things, but they don't really care about how the building would deal with such issues. But I found your buildings very interesting in the way they can make two things work and like create a design concept from these complicated, let's say, or technical issues as well. So I found it very interesting. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nicola. Thank you.
Tenemos dos latinos polacos conectados. Puede ser que tengan preguntas para la Renata, ¿no?
Dzień dobry, panie Renato.
Dobry. Nicola, we don't have the hand up.
No está la cara, pero está el PB.
Okay.
Piotr.
Hola, Iñaki. Muchas gracias por esta conferencia, a pani Renato, dziękuję bardzo, ma también a Iñaki, que como siempre es un amazing Abalos. Muchas gracias. Muy interesante y profundo. La profundidad es el tema. Muchas gracias.
Exactamente. Gracias a ti. Siempre se agradece un piropo.
Abbiamo qualcun altro che vuole intervenire? Abbiamo ancora 5 minuti di tempo. Se credete, nessuno vuole intervenire? Forse c'era Federica che mi pareva interessata a dialogare con Iñaki. Non so se c'è ancora.
Se ha dormito.
Forse si è staccata. Bene, se mi pare di capire che non c'è molta... è comparso. È comparso.
El juego de las sombras.
Sì.
Muy bien. È più una festa tra amici che una conferenza, ma bene così. Ci tiriamo un po' su, insomma. Ok.
La terza legge della termodinamica questa.
Sì, esattamente. Faccio un ultimo appello, vediamo se c'è qualcuno che vuole lanciarsi in qualche domanda, in qualche intervento. Non vedo mani alzate e niente. Allora andiamo a vederci le elezioni americane.
Sì.
Facendo corna, no?
Eso sí que va a ser termodinámica.
Proprio horror.
Bien. Muchísimas gracias, Iñaki y Renata. Espero que será otra posibilidad de verse en España, en Italia, ¿en dónde? En Polonia.
Perfecto.
Y bien, continuamos le combate, ¿no?
Esta vez a Danzig.
Sì, quello che hai detto. E niente, quindi ringrazio tutti quanti quelli che hanno partecipato, spero che in futuro ci sia una presenza più cospicua degli studenti, perché altrimenti diventa un discorso tra di noi, che pure è bello, ma insomma sarebbe interessante, anche perché la Stowe Foundation ha esattamente questo compito di sollecitare i giovani a entrare in contatto con queste realtà anche lontane, e quindi questo è un po' lo scopo dei November Talks. Faremo una pausa la settimana prossima, come sapete, e avremo invece una ripresa il 17 novembre con Joan Roig da Barcellona, altro simpaticissimo amico spagnolo, e poi avremo Juan Manuel Palerm, che è comparso tra di noi già oggi e che interverrà il 24 di novembre, e finiremo poi in Norvegia con Rajulf Ramstad, e quindi continueremo a avere delle posizioni anche abbastanza differenziate. Questo è un po' stato lo scopo anche della selezione che ho fatto, non soltanto per conoscenze e amicizie con alcuni di voi, ma per avere anche un ventaglio di posizioni abbastanza differenziato che ci possa consentire di confrontare un po' anche queste cose. Quindi naturalmente se avete tempo e voglia siete tutti quanti invitati a ripartecipare. Spero che il meccanismo di questa piattaforma Teams funzioni un po' meglio. Oggi tecnicamente mi pare che abbia funzionato abbastanza bene, però abbiamo avuto stranamente meno partecipanti dell'altra volta, pensavo invece fosse il contrario. Speriamo che possiamo procedere bene anche con questi problemi, ahimè, di lavorare a distanza. Grazie a tutti e in particolare a Renata e Iñaki, che viva Spagna, che viva Europa.
Que viva Venecia.
Que viva Venecia, sí.
Bien, muchísimas gracias a vosotros.
Muchas gracias.
Grazie, ciao, a presto.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Ciao Antonio, è comparso anche Piero.
Sì. Ciao Renato, ci sentiamo.
Sentiamo presto.
Presto, vai.
Auguri.
Ciao Quamma.
Adesso comincia la festa, potete accendete le telecamere che facciamo la festa. Spegniamo la registrazione.
No, e la registrazione che